One of the developments that has happened since the off-season started is a story about what Pedro Acosta wants to do next. Uri Puigdemont from motorsport.com Spain ran the story that Acosta has basically set his heart on the red factory Ducati seat, a little bit like Marc Marquez once did, and that turned out quite well for him, and that maybe Ducati is quite keen on making Acosta a front of its queue for any rider change it does make after 2026. Val, what has been reported here? What's your feeling about it?
Yeah, so basically the gist of the report is kind of as you described, though maybe not as emphatic. They didn't put it as high up, but I presume it's sourced in some way from the Acosta camp and from the Ducati camp. Although again, the degree to which they're saying it strongly, you can debate. But I would not be surprised if Pedro Acosta, for all of his public proclamations of loyalty to KTM, is eyeing up options that he prioritizes over KTM and Ducati. Would make sense, even if publicly, again, Pedro has said that for 2027, it's all a bit of a 50-50, but if you're going to try to go somewhere, Ducati makes sense. I think it is also notable that Uri, who both you and I, Matt, have worked with before, also had an interview with Acosta earlier this season, in which Acosta made it very clear that money is not a priority, which is the kind of thing you need to say if you do want to go to Ducati.
Yes.
That's not where you go to earn the big bucks, especially when their current renegotiation with Marc Marquez, whatever shape it's going to take, is where the lion's share of the budget will go towards for rider salaries. And, even if Marc also made decisions that clearly deprioritize salary now that it comes time to renewal time, and he's already given Ducati one title and is in a strong position to be its favorite, and maybe its only hope for the second title in 2026, he will be negotiating out of a position of strength. And I still believe that he will be interested in recouping some of what he gave up to go on this Ducati adventure and giving up the final year of a lucrative Honda deal. So the Pedro Acosta part of it makes sense to me. Ducati should be interested. It's a question of how, what forces within Ducati would pursue this the most strongly. It's a question of, ultimately we feel in Ducati that what Gigi Dall'Igna says goes, generally speaking, because of the recent record of success with the bikes. And Gigi Dall'Igna has certain rider preferences. Obviously, Ducati would never take the decision easily to discard Pecco Bagnaia, but I don't think that after a season like this, I don't think they would need too much convincing to do it. If Acosta shows his heart is set and he's willing to take favorable terms, etc. It was also, that same story also mentioned that the red Ducati is the priority for Acosta, but it doesn't have to be the red Ducati necessarily. It sounds like it doesn't have to be. Yeah, I also, it's difficult for me to see that, because that's both financial and status, etc. That's complicated.
I think it's even more than that.
Well,
go on.
So
please don't say satellite riders can't win.
Because Pramac's not a Ducati team anymore.
Yeah,
and VR46 is not a well-run team, and Gresini is perennial underdogs who relish that status, and neither of those things are the path to a championship, which is what Pedro Acosta wants. So unless he's willing for 2 years of winning races at Ducati with the intention of being Marc Marquez's replacement in 29, which is a long way away, I don't think either of those teams offer him what he wants.
Yeah, I generally would agree with that, but it is a question of whether Ducati does sort of have a prior for being able to sell riders on the idea of a satellite ride being what they want, even if they're used to factory surroundings, kind of. But I would also say...
Yeah, Acosta's not any rider in that respect, though, is he?
True. But Ducati also has a prior to where they have shown, and they can point to this for decades and decades to come here, if you're challenging on the satellite bike, if you're legitimately good enough, we will back you in the title fight. We will not make a problem for you. If you win championships for us on the satellite machinery, we will be okay with that. We will be happy. We will give the opportunity. I think that is valuable.
Ooh, they didn't give Jorge Martin the opportunity though, because they sacked him to make room for Marc Marquez.
Yes, but they gave him, but they did not stop him from winning the championship. And I don't think he'll feel like Jorge Martin will feel they didn't give him the opportunity. But of course, the MotoGP collective will now look at that decision and go, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense in hindsight. We understand why you did this, and it's not necessarily out of having stitched up Jorge Martin, because you could get Marc Marquez, and I think most riders in MotoGP understand in their heart of hearts they will be secondary to Marc Marquez on the rider market if Marc Marquez is in the offing. So it makes sense to me. I would be surprised if it's that simple for all the parties involved. I'd be surprised if it works financially, even despite the sort of public proclamations of, money's not that important, winning's important. I would be surprised if going into this, like if they don't keep Marc Marquez, if somehow Marc Marquez and Ducati don't agree on a renewal for 27 and there's a different avenue for Marquez, then immediately it's obviously open season. And then if you're Ducati, Pedro Acosta is basically the guy right away that you go to. If he's already shown an interest somehow from his camp, you immediately go, okay, welcome aboard on whatever the same terms that Marc was on. You're our guy now. But yeah, if Marc is in there, it is quite difficult to sort of make it all fit, but not necessarily impossible, I would say.
Well, this for me is the simple versus difficult question at the heart of this story. When you mentioned that you'd read this, Val, and floated it past us, my initial reaction was, oh, that's interesting / surprising. And then it was like, no, Matt, why should it be interesting / surprising? Ducati factory bike is the best bike. It will probably still be the best bike in the 2027 rule change because it's not that big a rule change relatively, and they've got a bit of a head start on working on that because their bike's been dominant for years, so it's not like they're scrapping till the very end of these rules. So quickest team, quickest bike. Pedro Acosta, of all the people who are kind of sub-Marquez, who you think of as people who will be around for like 10 years to come, he's the safest bet. Fermín Aldiger looks really interesting, but up and down rookie season, lots of pace, lots of bumping into people. David Alonso, not even in MotoGP yet. Acosta is the proven he is worth taking seriously. He will win championships. Simon shook his head at that.
Yeah, because Fermín Aldiger's won a race and Pedro Acosta hasn't.
Oh, yeah, there might have been a bit of bike involved in that, though.
Ever so slightly.
Yeah.
I mean, yes and no. Pedro Acosta's throwing away his fair share of wins.
On a KTM.
Has he fair share of wins? Wins.
Fair share.
Like, not
at
chances
at this point, a fair share is one. He hasn't won one yet.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a weird position today because I feel like the massive contrarian here. I feel like Val, because every time you guys say something, I like disagree with it. Yeah, because I don't think Ducati is guaranteed to be the best bike by any stretch.
No, of course not.
I think the rule change is huge.
Guaranteed.
Because the tire change is huge.
Yeah, but that doesn't make the tire change being huge doesn't make Yamaha, Honda, Aprilia, or KTM better placed for this than Ducati.
It means that I'm convinced that there is going to be a certain element of luck in 2027 with someone will get it more right than the others, the way that we've seen others in the past do the same thing. And the benefit that Ducati probably have is that they're faster positioned to correct that kind of medium to long term. And if things stay relatively the same, then they will be the dominant manufacturer again by the end of the rule cycle, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't. This is the thing. This is probably a terrible thing to say on a podcast that's all about what might happen in 2027. But I think the whole exercise at the minute is just really speculative until we see what happens in terms of motorbikes. Because Pedro Acosta might jump. I mean, we still don't even know whenever people are going to be able to ride 850 bikes on Pirellis. Racers are going to be able to ride them. But Pedro Acosta might jump on the new KTM and discover it's the greatest motorbike in the world and not want to tell anyone and sign his contract as soon as possible. Or it might be worse than the current bike. Or, we might go testing and the Ducati might be 3 seconds off the pace because they've went the wrong direction. Okay, unlikely. But I don't know. I think the whole thing, this all feels... This whole process, and I don't just mean Acosta and these comments that have pretty clearly come from his management to kind of fire people up a bit. It all feels like people kind of getting their ducks in a row to start negotiations once they've rode the bikes, rather than anyone actually making serious moves at this point.
Here's the reason why I would be surprised if that's the case. Like, again, as you say, speculative 100%, but I think we're being speculative, but the riders making the decisions, I believe, will have to be speculative.
This is it. They have to commit before they know anything, and that's what makes the speculation legitimate, because it's what's going on with all the rider managers right now.
Look, you've written the prototype or whatever, and somebody like you like it. You're not going to get a good picture of the competitive. Like, you're still going to have to base things on like maybe a general hunch, but also like the proven track record of the facilities, the people, etc., etc. Ducati maybe, again, definitely not guaranteed to dominate or even win, but if you're going to bet on a manufacturer that you're like, okay, they're not going to bottom out with the switch to 27, they are going to get me somewhere in the ballpark, there's no reason to bet on anyone over Ducati in that scenario. Then they, like other manufacturers, then have to offer you something extra, or Ducati has to really lowball you on salary, or or not offer you a seat at the best team. So it's a complicated one. It's one, again, you're right, it is speculative, but it has to be speculative based on what we know and what they know right now and maybe in a few months' time, but not so much what we know about early 2027, because how early are we going to get a picture? We don't even have the first whispers now of who's doing well and who's doing poorly. So,
well, the bikes don't exist yet.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly.
For me, there's a real opportunity for someone to win this contract cycle by being brave, by basically refusing to sign a contract until they're ready to sign it, even though manufacturers are going to be putting people under pressure to do it. There is an opportunity for someone to land on the right bike in the right situation by holding out until they see the way that things go. Not everyone would do that, because some people will feel in a weakened position and want to sign contracts as soon as possible, like maybe Pecco Bagnaia, unless next year starts considerably better. Some people are more money oriented and will look at the financial element of a contract before they look at the performance element of it, perhaps, or at least alongside it. And I'm like looking at Jorge Martin, who's already tried to get out of his Aprilia contract to earn more money this year. And then there will be people who are a bit braver and who are a bit more risk taking. The kind of the benefit for us as journalists who want this whole to last as long as possible so that we've got loads to write about is that probably the person in the most comfortable position to do that is Marc Marquez.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I don't think a Ducati deal is completely bolted on with a slightly resurgent Honda in particular. And I think that he is the guy that will be comfortable in waiting, and the world will wait for him. The other one is probably maybe Fabio Quartararo, who has the ability to kind of force manufacturers to wait for him. We've talked loads about Acosta, Marquez, Quartararo as the top three names whenever it comes to, and the three kind of linchpins of this. But I don't think Acosta is going to be one of those big linchpin deciders for everyone else, the same way that the other two are, because he's already doing this process. He's already trying to negotiate. So I think he's going to be someone who doesn't want to wait. And I don't know if that's the right strategy here. You buy yourself as much time as you can, I think.
Yeah, I just don't feel that anyone's really, like say, aside from Marc Marquez, anyone's really going to have that opportunity, because it's not that they'll be left with nothing when the music stops, because all these riders with this kind of profile who we're talking about, and like the tier below that as well, you're not going to see people like Jorge Martin, Marco Bezzecchi squeezed out of MotoGP or stuck in satellite rides here. There are enough factory rides to go around for the people who deserve them right now. The issue is, if you're Quartararo thinking, I've lost faith in what Yamaha's doing, I'm not sure about this, getting stuck at Yamaha for 2 more years is it's not much of a consolation prize. If he really feels it's done, he needs to make that move and commit. He can't wait for things to shake out. Go on, Val.
Here's a fun question. Here's a fun hypothetical. Let's say you're Ducati and you can get Acosta on the works contract right now, and then for the other seat, it's either Mark stays, it's Mark. If Mark doesn't stay, it's Pecco or whoever you want. Do you do it?
Ooh. Not if you're Ducati, because you've got so much power you don't have to, I would say. Okay. Simon, you actually agreed with that. That's good.
Yeah.
But Val, you did...
And they've got Aldegar.
Yeah, well, this is what... Val, your point about, do you just go now and go, I've got this person, I'll figure out the rest later. This is one of the big questions about this Acosta Ducati thing for me. This is... Once I thought, no, obviously it makes sense for them to be talking, for Acosta to go, you're my first choice. how much do you commit to getting one piece of your puzzle sorted and figure out the rest later? Because that was Ducati's strategy with, we can get Marc Marquez on the factory bike or we're going to lose him. We just do it. Whatever the other consequences, deal with those a different day. And the other consequences were everyone else who was any good in their lineup left. Slight blunt exaggeration, but kind of happened. And the flip side of that now is year and a half on, Marc Marquez gets injured. Ducati has a really rubbish end to the season relatively. Okay, Alex salvages some wins still, but Ducati was relatively a non-factor towards the tail end of the season without Marc because, Bez wasn't there, Bagnaia was weakened, Martin wasn't there. It wasn't the Ducati with strength and depth of old. I don't think that will stop a manufacturer still, if there's one rider it feels it can pin its whole campaign on, still going, we need to make our Marquez Ducati move, bang this guy on our bike, and the rest, solve that next week.
So here's the thing. I think Ducati will not do it. There's no indication they would do it. I mean, the same reporting says that their priority is for Pecco Bagnaia to sort himself out and continue his Ducati journey. I'm not 100,000% sure I actually believe that. I think that's something they might have to say, but I don't know. I mean, I would not be surprised if their priority is to see that actually Pecco cannot do it. And then can we actually go get the guy that might have more about him going forward? If I was Ducati, do I do it? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I do it. But it's the problem is, again, maybe I don't do it because of the public aspect of it, because you would be basically half giving up on your Italian two-time champion and airing that all out in the public. And if you do it behind the scenes and then it leaks out, then it's a disaster. If you sign some sort of pre-contract, and that doesn't necessarily always guarantee something. But I think on the evidence of this season, Acosta's a real good floor raiser to have, whatever else happens in your campaign, because I think an Acosta-less KTM would have been terrible this season, by and large. I mean, they've had obviously they had the Maverick injury that derailed them, but I don't think you want to necessarily rely on Maverick as the anchor of your program. They had a handful of really good rides for Enea Bastianini. Brad Binder always scores points, but it's Acosta that has kept KTM in any sort of conversations. It's Acosta that towards the end of the season made people by and large forget that KTM had run out of money and potentially run out of, the letters to put in its name. I think if you sign Pedro Acosta for 2027 as a team manager, manufacturer head, whatever, you can then kick back a little bit. You can sleep a little better. Whatever else happens in the contract cycle, whatever madness happens, you can feel okay about yourself. And if he shows a preference for it, I don't want to use the word negligent because position of power, blah blah blah. But it would be strange not to act on that preference.
The way Ryan O'Byrne in the Members Club summarised what Pedro Acosta is doing for KTM right now. We had loads of, actually, how good is Acosta? Look at what he's doing questions towards the end of the season. I liked Ryan's summary because he basically said, has Pedro Acosta just finished fourth in the Riders' Championship on what's been the fourth best bike on the grid? By implication, that means there's 12 faster bikes that Acosta is beating to that. You've both sort of wiggled your heads at that. I'll let Simon have it first.
I was pick up on something else Val said, because he set me up nicely for a point I was going to make anyway. The actual biggest decision here isn't, I've just realized this as Val was speaking, isn't what rider goes to what team first. It's when KTM decides whether or not they're staying in MotoGP. And that is going to be, while there's still looming question marks about that, it's really going to hurt their chance of signing anyone. Yeah. But if Bajaj announced tomorrow that 26 was the end of the KTM MotoGP project, actually life becomes a hell of a lot easier for Pedro Acosta, because then suddenly you discover that you're riding a Max Verstappen Honda, or you're riding a factory spec Ducati in a Tech 3 team run by Gunther Steiner and Richard Coleman, where there's loads of F1 money to make it not VR46, essentially.
So your theory is that if KTM disappears from that place on the grid, Dorna/Liberty makes sure something that fills that space.
Something F1-y fills the factory space, and Tech 3 end up on a decent bike.
And that is the place that Acosta could quickly slot into. Although
like
he'd have the choice of bikes, really. If KTM announces it's gone, then...
But I'm also pretty sure that if Pedro Acosta announced he was going to sign for Tech 3 and Tech 3 didn't have a manufacturer, he'd have his choice of bikes for them to bring in as a new satellite partner. That's the sort of smart deal that happens. But I think there's like the whole what happens with KTM thing is actually probably far more fundamentally important a question than does Marc Marquez sign with Ducati and what does that mean for Pedro Acosta?
A little bit of last-minute intrigue in the 2025 season was Honda doing just enough to move up a rank concessions-wise, which is great for not being an embarrassment, but a bit less good for testing and development. As Frank Quinn in the Race Members Club put it, will moving up to Grade C be seen as a negative or positive for Honda? I'd have lent more towards testing, maximising testing and upgrades myself. Simon, how do you see Honda's change, particularly in the context of what we're talking about right now and positioning itself to be in a really strong place in the rider market going into the next rules?
So everyone's talked a lot in the last year and a half about how the two Japanese manufacturers have really brought in a lot of European engineers and really positioned themselves with a very different work ethic, and how it's kind of really benefited them by being more flexible and having the best of the European side of things as well as the best of the Japanese things. I think Honda losing their concessions was the first little reminder we've had in a long time that they're still a Japanese team at heart, and kind of pride came above common sense. Because it's going to hurt them. It's absolutely going to hurt them. The racers are obviously going to benefit from it because they get more time at home. But I think that particularly the losing the ability to bring new engine specs week by week as you sign MotoGP's top-lauded engine builder to your project is going to hurt them. And I think it was, in hindsight, the way it came down to basically a point deciding it or not, it was a bit silly.
Yeah, I see the logic. I don't think it'll be that consequential at the end of the day, but I was surprised with how much they celebrated it, like on the rider side and also on the manufacturer side. I mean, they speak about it being, a big embarrassment, etc. Maybe within the paddock, within the organization. But really, people watching on TV, what are they? Rank A, D, B, C, concession, whatever. Who really cares?
How much is that? They're still only rank C, so they've moved off the bottom to the step off the bottom.
So from dung to crap. No, I'm not. I don't mean that, but I thought it would be quite funny. Anyway,
that's a hierarchy of poo I've never considered.
But I don't think it'll be that important because obviously it'll be big focus on 27 right away, and the concessions aren't going to be much help. 27 question of preparing for 27 is what Pirelli rubber you're going to get and Pirelli test days you're going to get, which is not governed by this. I think it would have mattered more if Honda had the rider in 26 to go for the championship, even outside shot. If Honda had one of those guys on its roster, because the bike is not there, but you could kind of squint and convince yourself that maybe with a bit of an extra effort, it could be there or thereabout at halfway point of the season in 26, maybe, with the right rider. I don't think they have the right rider, so it's okay.
I think they do have the right rider. The problem is that 1/3 of him lives inside Johan Zarco, 1/3 of him lives within Locatelli, and 1/3 within Joan Mir. I think you combine all three of them into one rider, they'd win the championship.
I can see that logic.
I see what you mean. But it's also, we did talk about this during one of the weekends, Simon. It is a question of, you do sometimes need to, this is not the most data-driven sport on the human side, and you do sort of need to protect organizations from themselves a little bit, and there's no great way of gauging the impact of fatigue, basically, through the season fatigue. We can try to at least a little bit eyeball the lap time impact of whatever rear wing, front fairing, etc., new swing arm. Even then, it's not very precise, but it's at least somewhere. There's some feeling for it. When it comes to the impact of how many tenths, hundredths, whatever you lose because your rider is too tired because he was doing a bunch of private testing, nobody knows. No idea. But there's no reason to definitely assume that it's zero. Might not be zero. And if the riders felt that they needed protecting from sort of the need to chase those marginal gains, potentially at the expense of their own focus or performance, I it might not be a total negative, but I do generally agree with the thesis that it is strange to celebrate the loss of ultimately an optional concession break. You don't want the new engine specs? Fine, don't bring any. You don't want to use the extra Michelin tire allocation for the season? Don't use them. You don't want the race riders testing? Send them home.
I mean, it's not just the rider fatigue element as well. I spoke to a Honda technical person who's European in pit lane while we were waiting for things to start in Valencia at the test. And he was telling me that he had a week in Japan after Valencia for kind of post-season debriefing, and then another week in Japan in January to build the bikes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's on top of all the private testing that he's done this year alongside his racer. And like it's on top of essentially 24 race weekends, because the 2 official tests are race weekends and everything but name. It's a lot. And we're not F1 where we have like, you know, fully separate organizations to do this within the team. It's the same 5 or 6 people going to, you know, Barcelona with Johan Zarco to do a test on a bike that hasn't changed substantially. Sometimes it's a lot. So yeah, there is certainly a benefit to it, but I mean that's also partly because MotoGP is bad at structures.
Yeah, like we say, Rank C is not in the scheme of things that worth dancing about compared to Rank D. You're still bottom half of the performance table there. But if you're a rider manager right now and you're looking at Honda having made some tangible progress, rules reset coming up, how seriously are you taking Honda as somewhere where you want to put your person?
Incredibly seriously, to the point where, look, if I don't know, there's an offer on the table, there's been no suggestion of any contact. If I'm Fabio Quartararo, I'm chucking the Yamaha offer in the trash right now and signing with Honda. So which is a thing that might age very badly in 12 months time, and I'm happy for it too, because sometimes you do have to go out on a limb. Yeah, look, I'm just saying, if I was a rider manager, they would be, if not first port of call, they would be very, very high, both because they can make my rider's life comfortable in terms of the salary and the other bells and whistles, and because the technical structure looks to be there to make things happen now, because even despite their recent years in wilderness, there is still a proven organizational competence there. And yeah, it just, I think incredibly seriously. That's the only, again, we're feeling around in the dark, but yeah, I don't actually, Ducati's above. Honestly, with all due respect to Aprilia and what they've done this season, which has been incredible, if I'm a rider, I don't know that anybody but Ducati I put above Honda in terms of attractiveness for 2027. And even then, the money or whatever other perks might make it closer than it really has any right to be.
Yeah, I mean, Honda will pay better than anyone else in the grid. In terms of base contract, you're going to get more money out of Honda because they can afford it. You just need to look at how many motorbikes they're selling off the back of MotoGP. You need to go to a Honda event in Indonesia or Vietnam, and you understand that they can afford to pay real salaries. And someone's going to jump at that. Someone is going to take it. Jorge Martin tried to, while already being sat looking at the second best bike in the grid with his number on it. But you know, Honda's form of late has been a blip. Everyone has always said that it was a blip because Honda don't not perform for any significant length of time. It was never going to be sustained that they would just be, Honda are terrible now. The way that arguably KTM are, they're terrible now. And there's not much sign of real improvement coming. But Honda identified that there was a problem. They struggled for a little bit, and then they just threw a massive bucket of money at it and hired basically everyone that they needed to hire. They hired Romano Bassiano away from Aprilia. They hired Aleix Espargaro away from Aprilia. They hired Kurt Trieb away from KTM. They brought in proper people to fix the problem, and it looks like they're fixing the problem. And I mean, Yamaha aren't there yet in terms of the results because they're doing a similar thing, but they started it a lot later than Honda did. So they're not there yet because they didn't have the shock of losing Marc Marquez to kind of motivate them. So they're not there yet. Aprilia have built a very good motorbike, but you feel like they're kind of at the limit in terms of budget with, I don't know if the Aprilia is ever going to be a title winning bike the way things are right now, just because they're limited compared to their rivals in terms of how much they can spend. And that's not on right. They did well to get two exceptional riders this year at probably bargain prices, especially Jorge Martin. I don't think that Aprilia can afford to hire in a normal world where everything is okay. I don't think Aprilia can afford to hire a reigning world champion or a guy who's on his way to being the reigning world champion away from another manufacturer on financial terms. I just don't think that works. But Honda can. Honda can poach. Honda can aggressively poach. And I think that they're going to.
Here's another hypothetical that I think is a fun one. So obviously Jorge Martin was in play. Obviously some sort of terms were discussed. Some kind of offer existed in some capacity. Let's say it did exist. Let's say there's specific terms that Jorge Martin was interested in over a 3-year period. Let's change that to a 2-year period. Does that same offer go back on the table right now?
To Martin.
From Honda to Jorge
100%.
Martin?
100%.
Yeah, I think it does. I was just thinking, as you were kind of building up this hypothetical, I was thinking the nature of that deal, the way that deal didn't happen, doesn't shut the door to it. If it had been a case of he's a free agent, he's signed for Honda, and then he's changed his mind, that's very different to there was this really complicated situation that didn't reflect particularly well on anybody, and they decided not to go through with it. That's
different.
So
Honda had to be
fear.
threatened by the series bosses for the deal not to happen, essentially.
So there's no fear that Jorge Martin won't be the same Jorge Martin that he was before this year. That's fair. Yep, that's fair.
We've already seen him smash himself to bits and come back stronger.
Yeah.
No, that's. I don't think that there's any long-term damage to his career here beyond the fact that he's going to start next year in a bit of a back foot. But
I think that's fair.
He starts 26th in this exact same position as he started 25, arguably.
But then if you're Martin, you sign it immediately, right? Already? If it's there, it's already done?
You wait and see how good the Aprilia feels.
Yeah.
You still give it a chance, because you don't want to see Bezzecchi win the first 4 races knowing that you have an unannounced Honda contract in your bag.
I think it's less, again, because of a sort of mistrust for Aprilia, and more because we know now from what Massimo Rivola has told us that Aprilia will prioritize a Bezzecchi extension, but won't try to aggressively push Martin for whatever reason or another, either because they still need to see the bike fit, etc., because obviously this season wasn't anything, or because they know that Martin wouldn't go for it right now,
or just because there's a bit of lingering mistrust.
Yeah, but if you're Martin, you have fallen in the free agent pecking order this year, just in absentia, right? I mean, through injury, because injuries, even he obviously he was awesome when he won the championship. He's been an awesome MotoGP rider, but sometimes all the team managers will think riders don't always come back the same after stuff like this. I mean, they will all think it. They can't not think it. So wouldn't you, if you're Jorge Martin, if there's a good deal, don't you kind of owe it to yourself to snap it up if it's good, instead of waiting for best possible?
I'm really excited to see what Simon's going to disagree with here, because watching his facial expressions, I've got a feeling he was about to disagree with Jorge Martin being any good in 2024 and disagree with the theory that Jorge Martin might have any question marks over him having smashed himself up multiple times in 2025. So, Simon, what are you disagreeing with?
I don't think he's fallen that much in the kind of free agent standings, depending on who you count as a free agent. Because I don't think
all of them, let's say.
But I don't think all of them are, because I don't think Bezzecchi's really a free agent.
Yeah.
I think Bezzecchi's going to sign an Aprilia extension pretty quickly. If Pecco Bagnaia is offered a Ducati extension, he takes it right away.
He shouldn't be. I'm sorry. He shouldn't be. I'm sorry, Pecco. No disrespect. That should not happen right now.
But if he goes to preseason testing and he's immediately old Pecco again and 5 seconds quicker than everyone else, then it's a done deal. It doesn't even need the season to start. But I think that there's elements of brand loyalty and manufacturer loyalty to some riders that make them not quite free agents in the same way. And I think that when you take that Marc Marquez is only a free agent if Honda really, really, really want him. There's nothing else. He's not going to Aprilia. He's not going to Yamaha. So really, your number one and number two free agents are probably Acosta. Well, it's Acosta, Quartararo, and Martin. And I don't think Martin's standing is, he was probably this joint second with Acosta fractionally, or third in that standing anyway. And I don't think the kind of the past year has really changed that.
I think it should have done. And this sounds callous in a way, but there was so much in 2025. There were so many injuries back to back, and it took a real toll on him, understandably. At some point in the next month, you'll get to read on the race website, and possibly in the Race Members Club, you'll get to read the full transcript as well. Hopefully we can bring you this amazing trip into Martin's brain that Simon had just before Martin gave us a little demonstration that he wasn't quite as sorted as he'd tried to portray to Simon by smacking into his teammate at the start of the Motegi racing, putting himself on the sidelines again. But Martin really opened up about how this season on the sidelines had felt for him and how much it questioned his future, how serious those injuries were. He's been through so much, and he is probably still the same rider he was at the end of 2024. But if I was a team manager looking around, I'd be like, I need to see preseason testing at least. I need to get a hint of whether this guy it has got through that okay. Because yes, Simon, you mentioned he smashed himself up before and came back stronger. That I guess you're thinking of his rookie season where he had that horrible Portimao crash.
Yep.
Really nasty. He was a couple of races into his MotoGP career. There wasn't almost time to think about anything other than get back, get fit, go. And he still, he was a winner relatively quickly, impressively.
Right away.
Yeah.
Literally.
But took a little while to actually settle down and really get back to, well, I just feel like he was the shunts. It's the shunts I'm thinking of. I felt like
I don't think that's fair.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think
he
that's
was
fair.
He was pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the speed was there, but I felt he was sketchy Martin for a while.
It was a rookie.
He's still sketchy.
Okay,
Martin.
okay,
MotoGP,
right.
yeah. And then
he is
hamstrung by engine spec. No,
Regardless of that, though, I don't think 2021 injury comeback reflects what all of 2025 with 5 different injuries comeback is gonna be. I would want to see some laps in preseason testing and a couple of races to go, okay, yeah, great. He's what he deserves to be, what he always has been still.
I do think that everyone is going to wait for preseason testing. We're not going to see contracts announced at team launches.
Not this
apart
year, no.
from maybe Bezecchi.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see contracts announced at team launches. It is going to be post preseason testing, maybe a couple of races in. We've had this before, haven't we? It's kind of traditional contracts start to get announced when MotoGP comes back to Europe.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be that sort of year.
Yeah. It's always been like Jerez is kind of the
Jerez
big
has
one.
always
Sometimes
been
Mugello for the Italian manufacturers, and then Red Bull Ring for when like the final bits, right? Late twists are where it happens generally.
If you listen to or watch this podcast as soon as it comes out, you are probably still just in time to take advantage of the Race Members Club Black Friday first month 50% discount. If you're in there already, got a lot of Christmas presents coming up for you. We've got the final end of our 2015 Revisited series with a set of specials. One of them is Jorge Lorenzo chatting about 2015 to Simon, which is absolutely glorious. I was listening to that again before this podcast. My favourite bit is where he shares such a mischievous Lorenzo-style theory for why Rossi was quick in races that year. And as soon as he said that, I was walking back from dropping the kids at school, listening to it in headphones. I just was like, oh, Jorge, you're very endearing. So we'll be doing that. We'll be talking about all the current MotoGP field. Well, not all of them, but lots of what they were getting up to in 2015 in Moto2 and Moto3. We'll be arguing about our top 10 2015 riders. We'll be doing the same about our top 10 2025 riders across the main feed and Members Club as well. And as we mentioned earlier, we're going to let you have a bit of a trip into the heads of some of these riders by sharing the in full uncut transcripts of Simon's interviews with a host of recent world champions and the world champion of winter testing for the last 10 years. Sorry, Val. Anyway, back to now. Before we conclude this podcast, we've talked a lot about hypotheticals, and I'm going to give you two chance to, it's almost like be the sort of philanthropist wing of Dorna, where you're looking around the paddock going, what's a really nice bike to have? I would say a really nice bike to have is a factory Aprilia. a nice handling bike in an atmosphere with a team run by Massimo Rivola, where you get some hugs, where you get looked after, and you can do what Bezzecchi has done and put a ropey season behind you and actually look brilliant again. Now, I think a Gresini Ducati engineered by Frankie Carcetti is a similar kind of, this is where you want to put someone to get them back on their feet kind of ride. But let's talk Aprilia, because there's been so many questions about the rest of the Aprilia lineup that I do feel are too speculative to even deal with right now, because we need to see Martin on track. We need to see if Raul Fernandez is kind of Phillip Island / Valencia Raul Fernandez for more than 10 minutes. We need to see Ayogura get over his wobble. Forget who's at Aprilia right now, apart from Bez, Simon. Who would you love to put on the Aprilia just to do them a favour?
Isn't even a question. I'd put a signing bonus in Marco Bezzecchi's contract for €1 million extra if he could help them sign Pecco Bagnaia.
Wow. $1 million's a lot for a guy who's...
a lot.
I would do everything in my power if I was Massimo Rivola to sign Pecco Bagnaia. I think that everything we've seen from Bagnaia this year, as his form has got worse and worse, as his kind of support from the factory has got worse and worse or less and less, I think that would all be fixed instantly by a Massimo Rivola hug. by that Rivola approach of being the guy who is very, very good at kind of taking slightly damaged riders and turning them around and making them really, really good again. He arguably did it with Aleix, but he definitely did it with Maverick, and he's done it with Bezzecchi. And I think that a Bagnaia with that attitude around him on a bike that is good and would suit his riding style would be, I mean, it's something I really want to see. I think that is just, that it makes so much sense.
That'd be really cool. No, I quite like that. I think, obviously the Bagnaia Yamaha thing keeps coming up in Italian media over and over again. And obviously it's been officially confirmed recently by him winning the 100-kilometer Valentino Rossi Ranch with Yamaha test rider Augusto Fernandez as his teammate. So clearly, yeah, that's your future lineup.
Augusto's going to sign a bonus.
Yeah, but yeah, I like it. I would honestly, I kind of would struggle to upgrade on that. It feels very nice, feels very neat. I don't think it will happen. It feels super, super, super neat and cool, and yeah, I just like it. I wish I had something better and more interesting to say than that's quite cool.
One. I was wondering, Val, if you might feel that if you're Aprilia, Bagnaia is actually too much of a risk. If there is a double championship, but has 2025 been so bad, so full of question marks that if you're a factory, you go, I don't know quite what I'm signing here. I don't know if this person can come back from this. At this, I say end of his career, like he's about 50, but you know what I mean. This is not someone who he's achieved more success than he might have expected to already. He's had a good half decade and a bit in MotoGP. I'm not absolutely convinced that there is a turnaround here, as much as actually I really like Pecco as a person. I don't think he's anywhere near as bad as he's looked this season. I don't think his titles were worthless. I'd love to see him come back, but I've got real skepticism over whether it's a definite switch where you put him in a team that has more hugs and a more predictable bike and he's fine.
And because of that, you can buy low if you're Aprilia, because of that very feeling.
True.
I think, well, sort of, maybe. It depends on how Pecco sees it, what's his market, what's his current feeling with Ducati, etc. obviously. But I think that's a bit harsh. Also because, it's not just fine if we feel a little different about the two titles on the best bike on the grid right now. Although, again, he was not the sole rider in possession of that best bike.
Yeah.
And he was Moto2 champion and signed out of Moto2 by Ducati before even that title. So he didn't come from nowhere. There was always a lot of upside to Pecco Bagnaia that got realized in MotoGP. We'll get to it more probably in the rankings episode, potentially, maybe, depending on how the scores shake out.
If he's in the top 10, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. And I don't even remember if he is in mine, I have to be honest. So, yeah. But I think we also shouldn't, and I think a lot of the MotoGP paddock might get caught up in this a little bit, we should not overstate the badness of the terrible season. I mean, there was maybe a 6-7 round stretch where it was just untenable. But if you take that as an aberration, and I think it was an aberration, or at least like an absolute worst case scenario, if you take, even with it, I've been looking through the gaps, trying to compile the gaps for the season, looking like qualifying, sprints, races, trying to look at the averages, etc. Bagnaia Marquez was not the most one-sided teammate partnership in MotoGP this season. And it's not even particularly close, honestly. It was middle of the road. I think it's important to keep in mind that sometimes you're going to come up against Marc Marquez and he's going to demolish you. That's what's going to happen. And it doesn't mean that you're not a properly valuable, solid asset for a manufacturer like Aprilia with maybe potentially massive upside of a champion rider, but also a baseline, even if he never is the same guy that he was at Ducati, or that guy that he was at Ducati wasn't as good as he seemed at the time. I mean, paired with Bezzecchi, that's still, I think, plenty good for a first or second bike in the manufacturer, assuming you retain Bezzecchi or somehow upgrade on Bezzecchi with, I don't know, a Fabio Quartararo or something like that.
Bagnaia still won 2 races this year, which is more than pretty much everyone, it's more than everyone but Marquez and Bezzecchi.
Yeah.
Other people would have killed for his year, even if it was a bit dark in places. But I need to go back to what you said, Matt, about Aprilia maybe not wanting to take risks. Aprilia signed Maverick Vinales 2 races after he tried to blow up Yamaha on track.
Yeah, they were in a different position then.
Aprilia had a lot. If they were.
They had a lot to prove.
Yeah, but like culturally, I think they're still in that headspace. Where we're still the underdogs, we're still the guys that take risks and take bets on people that they still have that mentality. So I think I don't see the 25 season as anything that will make Massimo Rivola not want to sign Pecco Bagnaia. I mean, look at the job he did defending Marco Bezzecchi in 24 after they signed him.
True.
Because they signed Bezzecchi and then he had a terrible second half of that season. And Rivola went to bat for him a lot. Rivola has went to bat for 3 years to defend Raul Fernandez.
Yeah.
Because he's been a risk that they thought was worth keeping. So I think that there's no part of the last 12 months that makes them not want to sign him. Nothing at all.
I guess as well, if you're putting Bagnaia with Bezzecchi, you're kind of recreating a VR46 vibe without having to have a team run by VR46, which probably has some upsides for how that will go.
It also really doubles down on Max Biaggi's comments at the final race about KTM, about Ducati just being a German team anyway, and about how Aprilia are the only actual Italian team in MotoGP, having 2 Italian riders.
The other rider who I'm not surprised didn't come up in the who would you put on the Aprilia to help them out conversation now, but I think would have done a year or 18 months ago, is Joan Mir, who I think is in an interesting position going into the contract period, because obviously 2020 world champion, which may or may not mean loads. Obviously incredibly crash happy all over the place for a lot of time at Honda, but slightly coming out of that this year, actually, with some exceptions. Okay, he's been taken out a lot as well, but there was a different Mir emerging again in the final part of the season. I don't think it was different enough to rehabilitate everything. But if I was in a kind of, I've missed out on that person need to take I could take a bit of a punt. I feel like if I was a team manager with a competitive bike, an amenable bike that maybe felt a bit like an old Suzuki, I would probably still take a look at Mir as my dice roll.
Don't mind it. They owe it to themselves to have a look. Also, I mean, this is my first. I did not prepare for this at all because there was no mention of Joan Mir in the episode notes. I didn't think about this at all. But when you said Joan Mir,
you prepare for episodes.
I was like, Yamaha should give a call. Yamaha should ask. But yeah, it would make sense because I think the race-based ability is still very, very eye-catching. I still really appreciate that part of his game a whole lot. I just, the DNF rate has been unacceptable. I mean, that much is clear. Everybody knows that. But there's still a rider there, which is true for all of them. But, I don't mind it.
I would imagine that Joan Mir is going to be top of the pecking order, top of the phone call list for kind of the majority of the grid satellite teams.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
I think he 100% people like maybe not LCR because they've filled their slots already, haven't they? But teams like Gresini and if Alex Marquez wants a factory bike, then they should absolutely be phoning me. Or Trackhouse, probably there's an argument for having a conversation with them. Tech 3, especially if they're not on KTM machinery, I think should absolutely be having a conversation with them. I think his name's up there. The other guy actually that I think is worth at least throwing their name into this hat of rehabilitated by Aprilia in an ideal world is probably Enea Bastianini as well.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah. I worry with Bastianini that we've seen too much. Okay, you could argue the same with me. You could say we've seen too much of the crashing, and that's the thing that sticks in your mind. With Bastianini, I feel like you've seen too much of the bad qualifying to think, I don't think this is a rider who's got that core bit of skill set that you need in modern MotoGP. So for all the upsides, there's this big limitation that he's just not getting past whatever bike you put him on with whatever characteristics, pretty much. But in terms of like ability and stuff, I love the idea of Bastianini really rehabilitating himself, like I did with that word eventually, because I think like his best days at the start of his career when he was doing incredible late race charges on a satellite bike showed so much promise and excitement.
Like at this point, we're naming the grid.
Oh, not quite. No, I haven't brought up Franco Morbidelli.
Give Alex Marquez a call. Have a look. Give Brad Binder a call. Have a look. So Brad Binder's a no and Enea Bastianini's a yes. That's interesting based on the season we've seen. I mean,
yeah, okay. All right. I'll take that.
Age and relative peaks.
No way there's a huge age difference. I have to.
Do we have to do this thing where I look up ages in the middle of an episode again? I need to have them. Okay, thanks, Phil.
I'll do it.
I've got the list open. I'll do it.
Okay, great.
I'll do it. Brad Binder 30, Enea Bastianini 27.
Yeah, you know what that is?
It's a contract cycle.
That is. You're not wrong. Yeah, it is more than I expected.
Yeah, interesting. All right, before we end up naming the whole grid, should we stop? Because Val's like torpedoed by premise, just as I thought we were still saying useful things. Simon, you've got one more MotoGP trip to go this season, you mad thing. Where are you off to?
I'm going to the FIM Awards.
Which might on paper sound quite glitzy, but you're doing quite a lot of work at the same time.
Yeah, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. Yeah, I'm not actually allowed into the awards, so...
What, at all?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we've got a load of stuff planned around the awards, but then they chuck us out for the actual ceremony. So, I don't even know if I'm packing my tuxedo because I don't even know if I kind of need it. But
well, whatever you end up getting up to, we know he has some useful chats planned that will be the core of next week's episode of this podcast. But you have to tune in to find out if he's done it all from kind of hanging around the red carpet, shouting at people from a distance, or actually got in to enjoy himself.
Pretty much.